Happy New Year, everybody. It's the Two Ordinary Cops, and we're back. How are you, Shelty?
Yeah, good mate. I did my usual, mate. Drank quite a few up until midnight on New Year's Eve, and then I haven't had a drop of alcohol since then. Mate,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's pretty standard for you, mate. First 3 months off, but you sort of make up for it for the last 9 months. Yeah.
So for everybody that doesn't know, I actually ever since I went to Ramangini back in 2013, I actually went dry for about 3 months, which was pretty incredible for me because I was in a non-alcoholic area, or dry area, as they say. And then from then on, I'd spent 3 years out there, and then I went to Borroloola, and I actually did 3 months, and then from then on, I've done 3 months. The first 3 months of every year, I don't drink.
Mm.
There are one or two exceptions. Usually, Damo twists my arm every now and again when we catch up, but usually it's only one day. So
Yeah, no,
see if
healthy,
you can
mate.
twist my arm this time, Damo.
Yeah, we'll see how we go. What's
Mm.
happening today, my friend?
Well, mate, we've got a couple of shout outs first, yeah, and then we're going to talk about why we joined the job.
Mm.
But we'll kick off with the shout outs, mate. I believe you've got a couple, but I'll give one to Stephen Hazel. He was actually squad 60 back in '97. Yeah, and he just said if we can do later on, if we can do a talk about what coppers do after their resignation or retirement from the force. I know we've touched on it a bit, but maybe we can probably get a couple of coppers that have retired, or resigned, and
Mm.
see where they've moved on after that. Because I think we've spoken about what we've done, but it'd probably be good to get a bit more information out there. And I know you said that, I mean, basically, you police officers do a job that not many other people get the opportunity to do, and you get to see a lot, and you bring with you a lot of you learn a lot of skills when you're in the police. So what you got to do is try and target them and push yourself into something you enjoy. I think, yeah, mate. You got any more
Yeah.
you want to add to that?
Oh, yeah, we can talk about this a bit later on, but yeah, just be aware of those transferable skills and understand that getting out of the force is going to be a while there where you're really shaken. You sort of get lost for a while.
Yeah,
It's important at that point to stay out and about and keep talking to new people and stay positive because it gets better. But there is a bit of a transition period from policing to non-policing, and the pace of life slows. Even if you go into a busy job, the pace of life slows. You're not dealing with life and death. The adrenaline drops off a fair bit, which mightn't be a bad thing in a lot of cases.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a bit of a show. We have touched on it a bit, but yeah, we'll talk about it more later on if you like.
yeah,
Sort of
definitely.
why we
And
joined and why
mate,
we left.
I just got a second one. I'll give Damo Duggs another shout out. We still haven't caught up for a bit, Damo, but I'm sure we will at some stage. But yeah, it's funny because I asked him if he worked over Christmas. He said, yeah. He said, of course, because his kids are older. He now does the shifts for police officers to kids, and it kind of resonated with yeah, like caught up with me because I've never had kids. Yeah, well, none that I know about. And and I so I used to do Christmas Day a lot because that means the families or the coppers with kids could actually spend their time with their kids, and I enjoyed working Christmas Day. It was a lot of fun. You can yeah, I mean sometimes they're a bit more easy, but sometimes they can really turn to shit. So yeah, mate. Yeah, what are your thoughts there, Damo?
Oh, Christmas Day. So yeah, I mean, that's almost a subject in itself. So Christmas and New Year's, obviously, it's party mode for most of society. The vast majority of companies and things like that stand down for 2 weeks over Christmas, New Year, and as a result, everyone's fairly festive. Um, and as those like Christmas Eve especially is a fairly big night in licensed premises, and normally that because they are so busy, you get the associated issues that go with that. Christmas Day, obviously, there's not much open, but you do have a lot of family together that aren't normally together, and that can cause issues. There's still alcohol consumption in homes and things like that. And I know that you've had a pretty wild Christmas Day, 2007.
Yeah,
That you've spoken about previously, and Christmas Day 2008. I think I've spoken about it too, but we were called out and then all day, 19 hours at a fatal crash on the road on the Stewart Highway corner with the Arnhem Road. So it's yeah, it can Central Arnhem Road, sorry. So it can those days can kick off and can be pretty busy. I had a pretty good shift. 2017, I was a shift sergeant Darwin City. I was day shift supervisor that day, and from memory, not a lot went on. It was pretty relaxed. But yeah, they can go from zero to 1,000. Can you imagine the Christmas Day 1974 police how they had in Darwin? That would have been one hell of a
Oh,
show. Cyclone Tracy
yeah.
ripped through the night before. You turn up for work, you don't know if you've got a house.
Yep.
Yeah, that would have been very full on. So yeah, Christmas Day and New Year's and all that holiday period. New Year's Eve can be extremely busy in and around the big celebrations occurring with New Year's. You got to have your wits about you. Quite often, there's extra members rostered for things like that, but sometimes that doesn't exist.
Yep.
So yeah, lots of things go on.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you want to do a couple of shout outs, mate?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So on Christmas Day, we had Christmas here at our place with my wife's side of the family, and um, there's a couple of they're sort of in-laws for me, but they're bloody good fellas. The Durkin brothers from Lennox Head. So it's Nathan and Matt Durkin. They're both keen listeners. Nathan, I think, more so than Matt. So, and he said, "Oh, I haven't got a shout out yet." Well, you got one now, brother. So that's Nathan and Matt Durkin, and their dad Kev as well. He listens in, which I was surprised about. So that's yeah, good. And he's saying they enjoyed it too. There's been a couple where he's had to turn them off because he had kids in the car, but that's all right. That's
Yep.
how it is. And another little shout out. I didn't realise that my I've got an auntie and a great auntie who listen. So I'll probably have to curb the language a bit. But a shout out to Cheryl and Margie Mills. So yeah, thanks for listening in.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, mate. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing who you hear who actually listens to it.
Mm,
You get surprised sometimes, don't you? From some of the people that actually join in and love it too.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. And if you hate it, let us know. We'll fix it. So
well, well, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
you got to contend with the people that like it. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly
we,
right.
we haven't had too many. Well, actually, I don't think they've got anybody that hated it so far. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even really get any bad comments. You get some weird ones on YouTube sometimes, but
Yeah, they're good fun.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So what are we on about? Why we joined the job, Schulte? Why did you join
Yeah,
the job?
well, yeah, mate. Yeah, yeah. So, and I thought about this. There's a couple of like a couple of people that said that they basically actually hold on, mate. I will give another one out to Jason. He's actually a copper up in Northern Territory. I'm not sure if I gave him a shout out last time, but he said there's a lot of younger people. He actually heard about our podcast through some through the probies in the police force. So he said you're reaching the next generation, which is pretty good. And it got me thinking. There's a lot of people we get on here that are listening to this and get in contact with us that are thinking about joining the job or just join the job or going into the training and all that sort of thing. So I know we did one ages ago, and for everybody listening, we did actually record while we joined the job years ago, but I apologize. We were so drunk that it just didn't turn out real well. It probably would have been pretty fun to listen to, but yeah. So we decided we'll do one when we're sober, Damo.
Yeah, exactly right, mate. Yep.
Mate, did you and look? So I was sitting there thinking, well, okay, we'll start off and so this will give some people idea on if you've got what it takes, I suppose, and it's all life experience as well, leading into it. So, mate, do you want me to kick off, or do you want to
Yeah,
start
you
off?
started off, mate.
All right.
Yep.
So basically, I mean, I've grew up. I wouldn't say in a policing family, but I've got uncles on both sides. Like, so my mum's brother, he was a police officer in Queensland back in the I think 50s through to 60s, and we'll get him on sometimes. He's got some incredible stories back in the day, and this is back in the day, listeners. When he got married, he had to get permission from the commissioner. So that's going back a long time, and he's got some really good stories. And also on my dad's side, my dad's brother was also a copper in Queensland. He joined in '74, and I think one of his first jobs was dealing with the '74 floods and victims. He was 16 at the time, so he would have been one of the cadet things back then. But he worked. I think he was in the police right up until he only retired, and I'll just have to try and remember. It was only like 2017 or something like that. So he was in for a very long time, like 40, 5+ years. And yeah, a lot of experience. I think he finished up a chief inspector or acting chief inspector. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, and we'd like to get him on sometime. I mean, he's got some stories over the years
Mm.
as well. Some pretty funny ones back in the day. But so I suppose for me, I mean, I've always been pretty stubborn, fairly resilient. I was bullied as a kid. I remember growing up, I used to catch the school bus back when more kids caught the school bus to school. And I had two older brothers, but they're not fighters. I've always been the more fighting one or physically fighting one in the family. And and I'm 5 years younger than my second brother and 8 years younger than my oldest. So, but I remember on the bus there was a kid a couple of years older than me, and he used to bully me all the time. And I remember my mum taught me, just don't react to him and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't react. And anyway, this one day he was sitting behind me and he got the shits and he hit me in the back of the head, and my head flew forward, like as in a solid punch to the back of the head. He would have been 3 years older. And my head flew forward and hit those steel bars that used to go over the top of the old school buses, and
Mm.
it cracked on that. And I'll tell you what, it hurt, and I wanted to cry, and I definitely had tears in my eyes, but I just sat there and still didn't react because that's what my mum taught me, and I just put up with it. But it was at that stage that one of my next door neighbours, he was the same age as the bully. He actually got up and defended me. And that guy was, and I stopped being bullied after that. And that guy was my hero. And I remember for years, oh, well, not years, it would have been probably, I don't know, 3 to 6 months later, I used to pretend to be, my new hero. And because I would have only been, oh, geez, 6, 7. Um, and I used to sit there and pretend to be, my new hero. And then I figured out, then I thought one day I'll sit there and go, why can't I be him? And I think that's where it started. I like if you look at my career or my life, I have fought bullies constantly my entire life. I've been in more fights, not for me, but for my mates, all the way through from that time on, all the way through school, so primary school, and then all the way through senior school. I've been in that many fights, and then I went up to Thursday Island, and that was was a crayfishing up there, and that was extremely volatile. The amount of fights I got into up there. So I learned to fight, and I learned how to box, and there was quite a few people that taught me. I was always a strong little bastard because I was a bush kid, and yeah. So I think that for me is probably, and I always wanted to be a police officer. I knew my uncles were police officers, and I always wanted to do that. So when I gave up crayfishing, I was sitting there deciding what I was going to do with my life. I think I was 28 when I finished crayfishing, and my dad said, he said, well, you've always wanted to be a police officer, and basically you've always defended, people that can't defend themselves. So, yeah, so I spoke to my uncle on my dad's side, and he said I should join the Northern Territory Police, because I think at that time you needed a degree or something to get into Queensland. I couldn't quite get
Mm.
in, but he said if you want to go to go to Northern Territory, he said you will learn so much, and he said you will also he basically said 1 year there is worth 3 years everywhere else, and he said in 3 years' time, once you're off your probation, the Queensland Police will take you back in a heartbeat. So that was originally my idea. I was going to go into the Northern Territory Police and then step across back to Queensland. But mate, I just loved the Northern Territory. It was so much fun, and I had all my mates there. We're working in a good station. We're kicking goals all the time when we joined the police. Yeah, so mate, that's my story. That's
Mm.
basically how I became a police officer, and it's because I've just always stood up to the bullies. I've got a real soft spot for victims and genuine victims. What pisses me off is when victims, well, when people play victim, that pisses me off no end. And I'll make sure that people like that know that what do we call them, the recidivist victim, because they will play that card, and it
Mm.
shits me to tears. But for genuine victims, I open up my heart to. So, and offenders, yeah, will look out when I was out there chasing you, because I wouldn't stop. But mate, how about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, a little bit different. So I didn't really have a lot of bullying. Maybe when I was really, really young, we had a bit of a thug who was out in a
Mate,
very small town.
that's because you're like fucking like you're probably 5 foot tall, but you're also 5 foot fucking wide, mate.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's probably right too. Anyway, we were yeah, no, I'd never really had much bullying, but it was also just the school didn't have a lot of it. There was a little bit, but I sort of was never really involved in it. I never really saw a lot of it. As a very junior kid, a little kid out in the bush, I had a little bit of it, but not too bad. But then I think the thing with me is I always liked adventure. Like I played a lot of rugby at high school. I was involved in school cadets, so I liked that military structure a little bit. Um, and then leaving school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wasn't too bad academically. I wasn't the brightest. I certainly didn't get the best scores, but I didn't get the worst. So I originally did nursing um, straight out of school, thinking I wanted to get in the medical side of things, and it was more to. I think back in the day, I was thinking helicopter rescue and stuff like that. But I was probably a bit too young and probably needed some life experience. I did nursing for 18 months. And then, because I'd always been interested in the military, sort of coming out of school cadets and stuff like that, which is chalk and cheese to the military, just quietly. I went to RMC Duntroon in 2002 as a staff cadet, so I was a trainee officer in the army. I did 18 months there, and look, it wasn't for me. I think I was too young, not mature enough for that role, and as a result, I didn't graduate. But one thing I did find that I was pretty good at was the civil military liaison stuff. So the things that weren't black and white, like here's the tactics, attack that hill, and just there was no need to do much more than just how tactically would you do this with utilizing machine guns and different assets. I was better at the stuff where you've got a complex situation here and you need to negotiate with people who aren't necessarily combatants and all things like that. And that was my first introduction to like a policing role. Um, and from there, because I didn't graduate, I just was no good in barracks. My bloody dress and bearing at the time was pretty poor. I wasn't. I was fairly popular. I had a lot of friends and still do who I went to Duntroon with, but it just wasn't for me. So I went back to Toowoomba and I was doing mass communication and public relations at university, and I just wasn't very interested. But in the meantime, I'd started working because we liked the nightclub scene, and there was a good little club on base there at uni. And anyway, he was looking for bouncers, so I did my security license, and I was a bouncer for a little while. So I was playing rugby, I was working in the pubs, and I'd sort of given uni away because I found that I could make good money just being a bouncer. But it was very, very hot, and look, I'll say this: security done well and properly, not just thug life bashings. I saw a bit of that. I also saw security done very well. I would say it's in the interaction, it is harder than policing in some ways, and the reason for that is when you turn up with a blue uniform on and a gun on your hip, they know that, right, you're the police. There's massive consequences for anything that occurs here. Whereas a lot of people who will have a crack at a bouncer wouldn't have a crack at a cop. So you would be just doing your job properly, and there was a lot of confrontation and a lot of that sort of thing. And I found I was pretty good at de-escalation. I didn't get it right every time. I got beaten up a few times. I was involved with the police a bit. There was a Foxtrot crew, an old foot patrol team in Toowoomba back those days. I'm not sure if they still have it. And there was a really good sergeant who was in charge of that. He's retired now, by the name of Ian Reamers. So any of the Queensland cops around in Toowoomba sort of quite a few years ago would know Ian. He was very good at that foot patrol. He had an excellent rapport with everyone. He got to know all the staff, security staff, and managers at the licensed premises. And he had this way of, you knew that he was black and white. He had no friend, no foe, but he was a friendly, engaging fella. And I looked at him and I thought, gee, he's a bloody good copper, and his crew were really good too. And I sort of got to thinking, well, maybe that's what I want to do. So I actually applied for the Queensland Police, but same thing. I didn't have enough uni at that stage. I needed to go back and do a couple more subjects to have enough uni to enter the Queensland Police at that point. This is 2005. So anyway, I made the decision at that point. Like, I think policing is what I want to do. Ian had a good chat to me, and he said that I should do it. He said, "No, you'd be good at it," because he sort of saw me in action a couple of times, de-escalating things, and he thought it was a good idea. And then there was a time where I had an application in, and I was just waiting on. I went back. I was still doing uni, but I was sort of deciding that, where do I want to go? Do I want to do this here? And anyway, an old senior sergeant, I think my dad had something to do with him, might have sold him a machine or something. They were having a beer, and I had a chat to him, and he sort of was getting out of the Queensland Police, and he thought, mate, he said, if you really want to get some good exposure as a very junior copper, he said, get out in the bush. He said, the Northern Territory's still a wild frontier. He said, that's probably not a bad idea. And very similar to you, he said, you can always come back. You can transition back to Queensland. And, being a Queensland kid, I thought that's what I'd want to do. Anyway, I got my fitness up and I finally passed and got in. And then obviously we started in 2007. But I think originally I didn't know a hell of a lot about policing. I'd had a little bit of exposure. I'd helped them hold offenders down and in Toowoomba and handcuff people and things like that, sort of around that nightclub precinct. But I hadn't had a lot to do with, I hadn't had anything to do with Indigenous communities and things like that. So that was all completely new to me. But yeah, I think that old senior sergeant, he was spot on the money. He's like, mate, if I was a young fella starting again, he said, I'd probably end up back here. And I think he'd finished at Chinchilla or something similar as the station OIC. And he thought I'd probably end up coming back because, family's closer over here in Queensland. But he said, I would have loved to have gone to the Northern Territory because it was just such a wild place. And anyway, I got the application. And I got accepted through the end of 2000. I think most of our testing was done through 2006. And then, we commenced February 2007. So, I sort of had a basic idea of what police did. There was no ability to sort of find out more. Like, you could watch videos and things that the police forces put out, recruiting ads and things like that. But you could, get that. We still had online services a little bit then. Like, it was the early stage of online applications. And I remember reading a bit about it and thinking, yeah, that sounds good. And I'll tell you what, I never regretted it. As soon as I got to the police college, I remember thinking, yeah, this feels right. Like this, we've got a lot of similar minded people. And I remember thinking, there's no one here I don't like. Like everyone here is a relaxed, good sense of humor, but a sense of right and wrong. And the instructors were the same. There was still a bit of knockabout. They encouraged socializing to a point. And it was, I think it cemented the fact for me that I'd made the right decision. And, fast forward 15 years, getting out was like leaving home. It was I was finished with that. I needed to prioritize family, but I'm so glad I did it, and I think that few little experiences before I joined the police sort of cemented for me why I wanted to join. And then commencing at the college in the first few months at the college sort of, solidified it. Yes, I've made the right decision. This is what I want to do. So, yeah, that was sort of how I joined. But, I think we've sort of covered off on leaving, and we touched on it a bit at the beginning, but I'm sure we've spoken about it before, but we may as well continue on. Like,
yeah,
I know Stephen asked that question about why did you get out, sort of thing, or what advice would you give to anyone who got out? It's like, I'm not really in a position. Everyone's got different circumstances. The reason I got out was because I was at work a lot. I've got young kids that we're all of our family are on the East Coast, being New South Wales and Queensland. So why? I'm sort of denying my children their grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles and everything like that. And it was just also, I was at a crossroads of, do we get promoted? And, I probably would have been promoted by now to a very busy sort of position where you're sort of not on call, but your phone would ring a lot more. Moving into the space where you're sort of more now a HR manager and dealing with issues around HR with other staff members. So what are we going to do for these guys? And dealing with people's leave, people's home problems. So you're not really policing as much. You're not operational. You're sort of more that high, that upper or that middle management. So I made that decision that no, maybe I'll just prioritize family and getting out. I think my wife said, I don't want you to do anything for 3 months. And in hindsight, I probably needed 12 months to just unwind and slow down because your brain just goes a million miles an hour. I was operating when I left, I was sort of running the COVID response from the police point of view, not the emergency operations centre, but just the police wing of that. So running that was very busy and there was a lot going on. It was complex. There was, CHO directions changing, chief health officer directions changing all the time. And it was difficult. But when I first got out, the trouble was it's like a freight train. You can't just slam the brakes on. You've got to let it stop. So I think it took me a long time to stop. That momentum had to wind down, and it took also a long time to realise that my that policing was no longer part of my personality, and it becomes such a big part of your personality, like we've spoken about in previous episodes. But what I quickly found was I did definitely have transferable skills. I found I'm able to talk to anybody, no worries at all. I don't get from any walk of life. Um, I can change the way I communicate with people to get my information across. One thing I realized I had a skill that I didn't even know I had was I've got the ability to explain something in a simple way. And I think I find that really handy now in training because I look back, I relate back to a lot of the things I did, but a lot of that is transferable, obviously, training firefighters in the bush. Um, I can explain things in a simple way to get that across to make it nice and clear. Like training things like work as a team. Well, the reason you work as a team is because if lots of people do little jobs, then nobody does a lot. So, there are big, heavy concepts within work as a team that you can break down and just make really simple and it explains it better. Work health safety stuff is about as dry as it gets, but we were talking about risk matrices and things like that. Well, I just took that information and broke it down into really simple concepts, and it seems to get across better than when I was first taught the work health safety components with the RFS. It was all just deliver the content, and the content is all in the work health safety speak, and it doesn't immediately click. But if you break it down and speak through it logically, it's actually quite simple. So I think all of those skills come from the police. So that's all that transferable skills. The biggest issue I find with police is that we call it the golden handcuffs. You get comfortable in discomfort. So you mightn't love the job anymore, or you might be just thinking, oh, maybe I should try something else. And that's fine. That's very natural. It might be that you just need to move to a different role within the police force itself. I know we mentioned Alicia in the last one, our friend, Junior and Alicia from up north. We caught up with them,
Yeah.
and she's moved from a role where she didn't really like being the supervisor and all this sort of thing into a role as a fingerprint expert, and she now says she loves it. She's absolutely found her niche and she's happy. So you can do that within the police, but if you really do need to transition out, understand that you mightn't even know what skills you have yet. There's so many different things that you would have had to do in the police force that have an application outside the police force. That
Yeah.
it's just, I think the biggest advice would be stay positive and believe in yourself because you've done a job that a lot of people couldn't do, and a lot of those other people are doing jobs, are working in the society and are quite successful. So you are lucky in that regard. The flip side of that is that a lot of those people who haven't worked in police don't understand what police can do. They don't understand the transferable skills, and that's going to create frustration. And that created a bit of frustration with me, where people sort of speak to you like you're a glorified security guard, and not taking away from security guards, but they just sort of view you as, oh yes, just stand back and look after things. We'll do this technical stuff, and it's that I
Yeah.
found that a little bit frustrating. People underestimate your abilities until you actually show them.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting out can be a little bit fraught as well. What are your thoughts on that, mate?
Well, mate, yeah, I mean, you touched on one thing there. It's like, when you're a security guard and the joy of being a police officer is, yeah, I mean, you do get some very heavy, shit that comes your way. But the thing is, we have massive powers to be able to deal with that, and
Mm.
so that makes it a lot easier. But communication, mate, that is one thing that we have to change the way we communicate depending on who we come across. So we deal with everybody, whether it's a victim or whether it's an offender, from every parts of society. And so you've got to change the way you actually communicate with them to get your message across. And I reckon that is probably one of the biggest um, things you learn, going through the police because you're confronted with it every day. Like, so most people deal with in their workplace, so they're dealing with their colleagues and all that sort of thing. They're probably talking to a few people outside of their workplace. However, police, you can go to anywhere between 30 to 50 jobs a day sometimes. And so you have to change the way you talk, and depending on whether you're talking to a victim or whether you're talking to an offender or what part of society they come from, you have to change every single person you chat to. I remember I had a girlfriend years ago that was studying psychology, and she used to look at me. She saw me go from the jovial, fun-loving guy, that's actually not in the police force, to becoming like as and then I'd have to like change and go on shift, and and she goes, it was just like this wall came down, and she goes, you went from basically a person to a robot, and not so much a robot, but you just it's like you put this face on, and your whole the way you communicate changes depending on the situation, and the way sometimes you have to be harsh, firm but fair. Sometimes you have to be kind, considerate. Chatting to people. Your job is one to protect people, but also to extract as much information as you can. So you have to it's an ability that all police officers learn over time, and I think it's one that people outside, like you said, exactly, other industries do not realize, or some of them might, but a lot of other industries don't realize the skills that you have because you were doing it constantly. And like I said, going to those, yeah, I mean, it could be anywhere. The amount of jobs you go to a day is just horrendous sometimes. Um, but that's where you get this ability to be able to chat to so many different areas, and what you said about like the freight train, you can't just or a ship, ocean liner, you can't just slam the brakes on and get it to stop, because you were doing this day in day out. It is, and you get involved in the golden handcuffs. You're dead right. You sit there and just get in that situation where you're just going non-stop and your brain's just going a million miles an hour. And then it's quite funny when you finish. You kind of wake up and go, oh, geez, what have I got? I know one thing I missed. I hated it towards the end. Um, and I think I mentioned this once before. I was basically, I finished up in Borroloola as a 2IC, and so second in charge, and so everything came through me. If an arrest came in, I led the troops and how we would deal with the arrest, basically. And I remember them always turning to me as soon as we got an arrest, especially a remand. I did a lot of the calling up for the magistrates on remands and all that sort of thing. But it was Borroloola was a very, very busy place. So every single time somebody was dealt with, well, they were basically turning to me and going, "How do we deal with this?" Or how would the procedure? How do you want to work with this? And I remember sitting there thinking at one stage towards the end, I'm going, I just wish somebody else could do this. Because I was definitely burnt out. I was so towards I was at the end of my tether,
Mm.
and I just sit there and go, I wish somebody else could actually do this, sometimes instead of me, because I would worry about how the file was getting put together, make sure that everything's ticked off, because I was also a prosecutor, making sure the file's perfect, so when it goes to court, if they're going, into jail or getting remanded in custody, everything has to be ready for this. Everything has to be tickety boo, because I want to get a successful prosecution. So all that weight, even though they would a lot of time doing the files up, all the weight was put on me, to make sure that I got those. I was successful in whatever arrest we came about. And I think the one thing, funnily enough, when I left, that's what I missed the most. People
Yeah,
turning to
being
me.
busy.
Yep, yep. And it was just so funny because I said, one of my mates actually in politics, a councillor, and he was burnt out as well. And he said, "Oh, no, I won't miss it." And I said, "You will." I said,
Mm.
"You will miss people because you get sick of everybody just talking to you and asking you questions and doing this, that, and the other. However, when you leave and you don't have it anymore, you will miss it." So, what do you reckon
Oh
there,
yeah,
mate?
definitely. Yeah, no, it's a it's an interesting thing. It's a pretty invasive career. It sort of really takes over a lot. But yeah, definitely worth it. Yeah, I'd say for people who, when you're thinking about it, like, oh, do I want to do this? It might have been an inkling, oh no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do this. You're not doing it by yourself. And we've said that 1,000
No.
times. It's like you're not expected to carry the weight of the world. And as a very junior, you'll be trained at the college, and then as a junior at the academy or the college, wherever you are. And when you get on the road, you've got mentors. You still train. Yeah, you're going to be bloody busy, but you learn all that, and you develop skills over time, and you will get comfortable in what you're doing. And
Yep.
from all walks of life, you don't need to have been a bouncer or a fighter, or you don't need to be a tough guy. If you can be an analytical thinker, I think you definitely need to be able to communicate.
Yep.
And you'll develop that too. You sort of just learn. Like you said earlier, you're mentor of people who you look up to, and that's exactly the same as what will happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people come from all different walks of life. Some of the best coppers I ever worked with, they were ringers. They
Yeah.
were ringers before, and they're bloody wrestling cattle, and all of a sudden they're cops, and they're doing everything there, and a lot more computer work at times, and out in the street. And I tell you where they were good. They were excellent at the communication with roughheads, and they were bloody good at what they did, and they were really good to have by your side because you knew they wouldn't take a backward step. They were some of the best. It's
Oh, definitely, mate. Yeah.
it doesn't matter. There were people from all different walks of life. We had some really really young guys who joined, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that everyone should join. I would have been way too young at 19. I was about right at 24.
Yep.
But there was people from everywhere, all walks of life, all age groups. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It takes all that to sort of create the force, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, mate, definitely. And yeah, you're right. There is so many. Everybody, and I know we've spoken about this before, but everybody brings something to the job. And I
Mm,
think the most important thing that when you get in the police, just have the ability to learn because you are going to learn so much, but also learn how to transfer those skills you've already learned in life. And I think you were right, and taking nothing away. I mean, I think Katie was 19 when she joined the job. She became an excellent police officer.
yeah,
But I think in my experience, I would say the rule is I think about probably 24, anywhere around 24, 25 is probably a really good time. But then also
yeah,
taking nothing away from the guy that enter in their late 40s.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
they bring something different to the table as well, and and as well as the 19-year-olds, they give you a different feel they're probably better at talking to the younger generation to a
Mm,
certain extent as well. So I think when you join the police, learn from those different age groups that you're dealing with, and learn how you have to communicate with the different age groups as well. Because we didn't mention that. I said about different people in society. However, the age groups, you've got to change your communication depending on whether you're talking to a 60-year-old or a 16-year-old. Yeah, so and everybody has that ability depending on what age group they are. So yeah, mate, that's yeah, definitely a good point. But
yeah, I think the final little thing I wouldn't mind touching just about getting out of the police. It's sort of to people who aren't police. If you've got people who are applying for work with your company or with your department, if you're a government worker or anything like that, if you see police, think depth of experience, and it will depend obviously on the individual and how long they've served. But quite, it's very likely that they've dealt with a lot of different situations. I've got, generally they will be excellent communicators. They'll be good under pressure. They will have dealt with things that make other what seem like a critical problem in a company. It's like, okay, we've got a problem. We have to fix this, but there's no one bleeding, so we'll be right. We'll get through it.
yeah,
So there's no imminent threat of death or serious harm. We're gonna deal with this, and don't get me wrong, we can't. It's an issue, but we'll fix it. So there's that sort of confidence of having dealt with when you've dealt with
yeah,
really bad things that are people's life on the line or life gone. Everything else just seems simpler. So yeah, if you're looking at hiring people, people who are getting out of the police force, potentially very good recruits for your business, whatever that is.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, mate. I
Mm.
like that's probably a big thing. And I think people like the fact that I've done a couple of management things since I left, and they always sit there and go, "You were so calm." But you learn how to do that. Police officers become very good under pressure. So it doesn't matter how much you load on top of them. They will sit there. They will like experienced cops. They will sit back and think about it, and they'll think about the best way to go about things. And I know we've said it before, Damo. You get your first jobs when you're on the police, and you just rush it. You want to get out there. You want to go out. It's just exciting. It's so much fun and
Yeah,
all that sort of thing. But you're older. The older police just stand back.
yeah,
Let's think about this. Let's go into this with covering all the bases and all that sort of thing.
yeah,
So that's one of the biggest, I think, I suppose, things you learn being a police officer. You are so good under pressure and high risk situations. You just calm things down, And we've spoken about the best leaders. The best leaders were the ones that sit there. It didn't matter what happened. They were always calm and they were always deliberate in about every order they gave.
Yeah.
And
I'll,
that's that
I'll
goes
relate
back.
it back to our old superintendent, Cole Smith, very old school fella.
Yes.
I remember saying you couldn't upset him. You could say, I think the running joke was 3747s could collide directly above Catherine and rain bodies from the sky. And
Yep.
he'd just scratch his head and go, better set up a crime scene, eh?
Yeah.
It's just, you couldn't upset the bloke. So,
No.
he was an exception. He was a very experienced copper. But, yeah, there's plenty of them out there.
Yep, and he calmed the troops.
He did, yeah.
Everybody, would who anybody that was frantic would suddenly be calm because of the way he approached the situation.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
so
definitely.
yeah, definitely a big shout out to him. But mate, we better move on. Do you want to introduce our territory one that we're going to release an hour later?
Yeah, so the third interview from our trip to the Territory a couple of weeks back, we're going to speak to the current vice president of the Northern Territory Police Association, and also a current sergeant instructor at the college, Sergeant Adam Swift. So he'll be coming up next, and a good
Yep.
chat with Swifty. He's got a lot of experience up there, worked a lot in Alice Springs, got some bloody good stories about Groot Island. So yeah, an excellent interview with him, and his current role now at the college and just the mentoring that he takes on there. So definitely worth a listen. But yeah,
Oh,
from our point of view, we'll that'll drop in an hour's time after this comes out, and yeah, we'll be back next week, Shelty.
yeah, mate, we will. And for anybody listening to it, I do apologise. I tried to get he as he talks, he uses his hands a lot, so there's a little bit of knocking on the table. But yeah, but it won't be it won't take you away from some of the great stories and what he has to say. That's for sure.
No, definitely. Oh, mate, that's it. We'll Two Ordinary Cops. We'll sign off for another week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, see you later, everyone.